The grand ballroom of the Astoria Hotel was dressed in gold that night. Crystal chandeliers dangled like frozen rain, scattering light across polished marble floors. Waiters in white gloves carried trays of champagne, weaving through the laughter of the city's elite. The air smelled of roses and expensive perfume, every detail screaming of wealth and power. At the center of it all stood Alexander Reed, a man whose fortune was built from nothing but ruthless decisions and relentless ambition. He wore his arrogance like another layer of his tailored suit, each stride declaring, "I own this room." Alexander thrived on attention, and at these events, he fed off the admiration and envy of others. But behind his eyes was a constant boredom, another gala, another charity function, another excuse for the rich to parade their generosity while writing checks that meant nothing to their overflowing accounts. He sipped his wine, smirked at the dull speeches, and waited for something, or someone, interesting enough to entertain him. And then, he saw her. At first, it seemed like a mistake. A little girl, no more than 10, stood near the side entrance, clutching a scuffed violin case against her chest. Her thin dress hung awkwardly on her frame, far too small for the grandeur of the room, and her shoes had holes that revealed her socks. She looked like she didn't belong, and truthfully, she didn't. Her name was Lily, though no one in the room cared to know it yet. She had been invited by a kind-hearted event organizer who believed that talent, no matter how small or hidden, deserved a stage. But as Lily stepped forward, hesitant and timid under the weight of countless eyes, whispers broke out among the guests. "Who let her in?" Someone muttered. "What is this, a joke?" Laughed another. Alexander, leaning lazily against the bar, was the loudest of them all. His sharp voice sliced through the murmurs, drawing attention. "Well, this is unexpected," he drawled, raising his glass. "A little street performer at a Millionaire's gala. Tell you what, sweetheart, play for us, and if you're good enough, maybe I'll adopt you." His words dripped with mockery, each syllable a dagger meant to amuse the crowd. A wave of cruel laughter followed, bouncing off the golden walls of the ballroom. Lily froze, her cheeks burning red. Her fingers trembled as they traced the worn handle of her violin case. She wasn't used to such ridicule. She wasn't used to standing before so many people at all. Yet behind her fear was something stronger, an unshakable resolve born from years of hardship. This was her chance. She might not have wealth, fine clothes, or powerful connections, but she had music. And music was hers alone. With a shaky breath, Lily stepped up to the stage. She placed the violin beneath her chin, the bow quivering slightly in her hand. The room grew restless, a few chuckles still echoing, waiting for her to fail. Alexander smirked, already certain of the outcome, but in that fragile moment, as she prepared to play her first note, Lily's eyes burned with something the millionaire could not recognize yet, fire. The ballroom was restless as Lily raised her bow. A few guests coughed impatiently, some whispered among themselves, and Alexander Reed leaned back in his chair, smirk still carved into his face. To him, this was entertainment, the kind that proved wealth meant power, and power meant the ability to humiliate. He expected squeaky strings, a clumsy attempt at a children's tune, maybe even tears before she finished her first bar. But when the bow touched the strings, the sound that emerged silenced the room. It began soft, like a whisper carried on the wind. The first note was fragile, trembling like the girl herself, but it stretched into the air within. Honesty no one could ignore. Conversations died mid-sentence. Glasses hovered halfway to lips. Then, as Lily found her rhythm, the music grew, stronger, fuller, braver. The violin sang with a voice beyond her years, a voice shaped by pain, longing, and hope. Each stroke of her bow poured out her story. The melody carried the chill of nights spent in shelters, the ache of hunger, the sting of laughter from children who mocked her ragged clothes. It held the quiet memory of her mother's lullabies before illness stole her away, and the desperate courage of a child who learned to make the violin her only friend. The music wrapped around the listeners, weaving a tapestry of sorrow and beauty that pulled at their hearts. The guests, who had moments earlier snickered at her presence, now sat spellbound. Their jeweled gowns and polished shoes suddenly felt weightless, meaningless, compared to the raw truth pouring from the strings of that battered violin. A woman dabbed her eyes with a silk handkerchief. A man who had been busy checking his watch now leaned forward, hands clasped, unable to look away. And Alexander Reed, the man who had mocked her most cruelly, sat frozen. At first, he tried to resist it, to dismiss the sound as a trick of the acoustics or a lucky accident. But the longer she played, the harder it became to deny what he was hearing. Something unfamiliar tugged at his chest, an ache he couldn't name, a crack in the wall he had built around himself. His smirk had vanished, replaced by a furrowed brow and eyes that refused to leave the girl. Lily played as though her life depended on it. The bow danced, the notes soared, and the violin cried and laughed in the same breath. The music filled every corner of the room, leaving no space for mockery or pride. By the time she reached the final note, a delicate, trembling whisper that lingered like a prayer, the entire ballroom was breathless. Then came the silence, a silence so heavy, so charged, it felt sacred. And in that silence, a single tear slid down Lily's cheek. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the applause erupted, loud, thunderous, and unstoppable. The crowd rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, some even shouting her name though they had only just learned it. The sound shook the golden chandeliers, echoing far louder than their earlier laughter. And Alexander Reed, his glass sat untouched, forgotten. His hands, the same hands that had built empires, now itched to clap, but he couldn't. He was still too stunned, too shaken by the little girl who had shattered his arrogance with nothing but music. The applause thundered through the ballroom, echoing against gilded walls and crystal chandeliers. Lily stood frozen on the stage, her violin lowered at her side. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her cheeks flushed, and a single tear still clung to her lashes. She had poured every ounce of her heart into the music, but she had not expected this. The same people who had mocked her minutes ago were now clapping until their hands stung, their eyes shining with awe. Some shouted, "Bravo," while others wiped tears from their cheeks. For Lily, the sound was overwhelming, almost unreal. But through the sea of applause, one man's reaction mattered more than all the others, Alexander Reed. He did not clap at first. He did not move. He sat perfectly still, staring at the little girl on the stage with something heavy and unrecognizable stirring inside him. The mocking smirk that had always lived on his lips was gone, erased by something raw, something vulnerable. His heart, used to the rhythms of deals and profit margins, had been shaken by the fragile strength of a child's song. Finally, he stood. The crowd parted instinctively as Alexander Reed made his way to the stage. The clapping slowed, whispers rippled through the room. Lily's breath caught. She expected another insult, another cruel remark to pierce the moment. Her fingers clutched the violin tightly, as if it could shield her from whatever words he might throw next. But when Alexander reached her, he didn't smirk. He didn't raise his voice. He lowered himself to one knee in front of her, so that his eyes met hers. Gasps echoed through the audience. The proud millionaire, known for never bowing to anyone, was kneeling before a barefoot girl with a battered violin. "You," his voice broke slightly, unsteady. "You play with more soul than any musician I've ever heard. I mocked you because I didn't believe you could be anything more than a joke. But I was wrong, so very wrong." Lily blinked, unsure if she was dreaming. Alexander's hand trembled as he reached toward her shoulder but stopped short, as if asking for permission. "I don't want to adopt you as some cruel dare, as I said before," he continued, his tone hushed but carrying through the silent ballroom. "I want to give you a home, not because I pity you, but because the world deserves to hear your gift. And you deserve to grow without fear, without hunger, without shame. If you'll let me, I'll make sure you never have to fight alone again." The audience held its breath. Lily's lips parted, her small chest rising and falling as if she was carrying the weight of the entire moment. Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness, but from something brighter, warmer, something she hadn't felt in years. Slowly, she nodded. The room erupted once more, but this time not with mockery or surprise, it was joy, genuine and unrestrained. Applause rang like thunder, and even the coldest of the wealthy guests smiled through tears. Alexander stood, placing his arm gently around Lily, and for the first time in his life, he felt richer than all the fortunes he had ever earned. In that golden hall, under chandeliers that glittered like stars, a hardened millionaire and a little girl with a violin found something neither had expected: family.